All right, now you can all hear me. Welcome, everybody. And I'm glad you didn't get up because this isn't a time for us to be getting up yet. I just wanted to welcome you all to our new venue. This is really exciting. We're actually getting served meals here. We're actually going to be able to have some time before the meetings to visit with one another and sit down and enjoy sort of a little history because this is what we used to do in downtown Rotary. And I like to bring a little bit back as we make some of the changes in our club. And so this is all really very exciting. This is where we will be for most of the time next year. Although we are going to be at Motif later this month, but then there'll be a plated meal also there. At this particular point in time, before we get started with our singing and our music, I want to ask Larry Granite to come up. That means you have to swallow your food, Larry. He has a remembrance for us of one of our club members, and I will let him take charge at this point. It's really interesting. Before he gets started, I just wanted to let you know that Larry and I were inducted in this club on the same day. It also tells you how old we are. But anyway, go ahead, Larry.
I think it tells you how old I am, but not. He looks a lot younger than me. Anyhow, good afternoon. Last Thursday morning, we awoke to learn that a true Rotarian, David Endicott, had left Earth for a better place. He had been suffering from heart problems for a long while, but the medical team at Virginia Mason had kept him going. David grew up in Viroqua. I had to practice that, Wisconsin, and graduated later, a number of years later, from the University of Wisconsin. He joined Seattle 4 in 1996. He was instantly on the program committee, where he fought for years to bring a variety of programs where we could learn something and walk away at the end of the meeting glad that we came. In approximately 2016, David was persuaded by district leadership to start a virtual Rotary in the Puget Sound and become its first president. Going back to 2007, David decided to turn his passion for music education into a District 5030 sponsored nonprofit. It was called Music for Life, and hopefully most of you have heard of it. This was his child, his baby, his passion until his untimely passing. Music for Life has donated well over 1,500 full-size, ready-to-play musical instruments to its members, school, which are his Music for Life's members are school districts. I believe there's 16 of them. Prior to Rotary, David was in public relations, most prominently as a press secretary for our Senator Slade Gordon. And this was from 1982 to 1987. He was later appointed by Governor Mike Lowry to the Washington State Healthcare Advisory Board. David lived the four-way test. Thank you.
Let's have just a moment of silence in memory of David. I do like to ring that bell. Anyway. Now it's time for our musical interlude. And of course, we all join in. And today we have not only Linda Ruff, is Freeman here? No Freeman today, but we do have Dr. Sue Erber, right? It's hard for me to pronounce it. Erber. All right. Oh, all right. Given that, though, we should all try and stand up because you don't sing well when you're sitting down.
Thank you, John. That's true. On this beautiful summer day, let's sing the lovely lyrics penned in 1895 by Catherine Bates, Wesleyan professor, who was visiting Pikes Peak at the time. Sue will play the first verse, and then let's join her in a reprise. I'll bring you in. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, or amber waves of grain, for purple mountains, majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee and crown thy good from sea to shining sea.
All right, please be seated and continue eating your meal. It's really a pleasure to have had a violinist perform for us. I want to be also to welcome our guests on the screen. Hopefully, there they are. So welcome to everybody. I want to thank Karen Kalish for being our greeter today, and thanking Pete Delaney, who is going to write a wonderful review of our program today. I am now going to bring up Nicole Klein, who is going to do a little bit of a table talk with us. They will. Well, no, you have to introduce it though. And that means you've got to look on your table, right?
Okay. So in order to get us to kind of get to know each other better, and we have some guests here today, you have some cutout papers on your tables, and we have 5 minutes, which isn't very much, and I know we're a chatty group, so you can pick which either of the questions you like, and if you're a Rotary guest, you might not know your favorite John Bridge program this year, so you might pick the one about summer travel. Okay, so we got 5 minutes to get around the whole table, and if someone wants to take the lead and make that happen, here we go.
And one thing before you get started, this was one of the things that my dad always did years ago when he was here at Rotary, and he wasn't president of Rotary, but what he did do at any table he was sitting at, and I know Edie knows this and Bobby knows this and a whole bunch of people, introduce yourself and tell us something about yourself too. And he made everybody do this, whether they liked it or not. So let's do that also in our 5 minutes.
I think they're having table talk for 5 minutes. Just-
Oh, it's not a Zoom. I mean,
It's not a Zoom only
Not a
meeting.
Zoom.
No, it's a live meeting.
okay, what time is it? 20 to 1.
Now this chair, you're gonna want again, right?
Yeah, but not.
But not for lunch.
Not at 4 o'clock.
Right. Well, I'll be here. You're going to the bathroom? All right, I'm gonna do that. No.
So it's time.
Yep.
You're not going to do all the screens before you do the things that really need to be done. For sure, right?
No.
Well, it's a good feeling. Getting it done. These guys go to their trucks to have lunch a lot.
Yep.
Are you making? Tell your dad's story, quick favor to you,
Hmm?
you need to concentrate.
No, you can tell them.
She was upgrading her internet to high speed, which it hadn't been, you know, she was doing all these classes. And the guy who came to do it, made a big mistake, drilled into the electric somehow,
Oh,
and
God.
there was a fire.
Yep.
And she called 911, And she said because of doing Tai Chi all the time, she didn't get mean, defensive, what are you doing burning out my house? And, they got it out and they got the power back and, it happened like 12:30 and it was all done by about 7. And that internet guy stayed the whole time. And then at the end, he was so sorry, and they're both crying. She said she was consoling him. I felt, the same way, like, about I didn't want to write anything in this chat or anything, but about my foot, I mean, I could have been really mad at the building and sued them and that kind of stuff, and Mark and. I'm sure Mark is very relieved that we're sending him funny videos and stuff instead of suing. So maybe it's all due to Qigong.
Yeah. Right. I agree.
She said everybody that she told about it, her friends and family said, "Oh, you should sue them." Blah 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 blah. Get after them. She didn't feel like that.
Yeah. That's all the things that go on.
Yeah. Ambulance chasers. The word.
Yep, that's the word.
What?
I just shows such a high level of disgust. What's going on right here in this country? Horrible. David Wallace Wells did a piece on, he's looking into the surveys about.
This was garbage, Dad.
Oh, you're kidding me. Misinterpreting that.
That's so funny.
That is funny.
I felt that I didn't have any left, but there it was. I said, we get that work a little bit. David Wallace Wells.
He has another too long piece, but very, well researched and interesting.
Sure.
But it's basically about how disturbing it is that there's been this reactionary gender thing going on, where significant changes in polling results have been going on about, should women be paid equally to men? And should women, it's like gender
People still
equality.
think not.
Yeah, well, it didn't start with.
Give me a tour.
It didn't start with the Roe, sorry, you said
Say-
sure.
It's
It
a-
didn't start with
that.
the Roe versus Wade collapse, but that was part of it too. But it's like women should stay home and raise make
Who
babies.
thinks that anymore?
Like, and it, a significantly increasing number of people.
Increasing.
Yeah, an increasing number of people on both Republicans and
Come
Democrats
on.
are polling.
Democrats?
Yeah, Democrats. And, the whole gender identity thing is, his piece is basically how this is a tragic reactionary development in, and it goes beyond politics. The point of this article is this is not just a political problem. This is a United States cultural crisis. That, we made all this progress in gender equality and suddenly it's going out the window because of some toxic masculinity bros that are in the process of taking over the government policy and, that guy that,
I love ringing that bell, as I told you. I wanted to, I really don't like interrupting. The table talk seems to be going really well. It's something that, Nicole and Susie have put together this year that we are going to continue next year. in our Rotary year. I know that President Jan will like that. It's something exciting. It's at least we get to meet one another. You know, it's pretty hard
It
when
is
we've got
really
this
great
big
to
a
have
group to
5 minutes
meet
like
each
that.
other. And getting around in
Well, they have a
around the
topic,
table
and it's
where we
supposed to be
actually can
discussing,
sit
so
around a
not-
table makes
What
good
if
sense
you don't know what to say?
to
Well,
introduce ourselves. And
you
then
know what
this
to
coming
say.
year, let's
The
try
idea is
and
to
make
try to
it
go
so that
around the
we
table,
switch
have something to
tables
say.
so we aren't
You have
all at
everything
the
to say
same
is fast,
table
I guess.
every
You
week.
can
So
still say who you are.
anyway, that's just
Exactly.
my sort of editorializing. I want to thank you very much, Nicole, for this, and pass that on to Susie too, although she isn't here today. And now I have the real pleasure of introducing our 19th State Attorney General, Nick Brown, who was elected to office in November of this last year. Nick grew up in Stillicombe and is a proud product of our public schools and is a son of public servants. His dad was an Army veteran. His mom was a nurse and healthcare administrator. Following his parents' footsteps, as I did with mine, he joined the Navy and went, and the Army, I'm sorry.
You wanted to watch this? What story?
I did that on purpose. You're right. I have Navy on my mind. I joined the Navy. I went through Navy ROTC, but our Attorney General went through Army ROTC, and he did this at Morehouse College, where he graduated. And then, very fortunately, the Army sent him straight to law school, and then he went to the Army JAG school and then served as a Army lawyer. And just
Lawyer?
like I got to do, but I had to go to sea first. They wouldn't let me go straight to law school. I tried, so I had to go to sea. Anyway, the idea is that Army and Navy
You don't have to
JAG
go to sea.
officers are basically criminal defense and trial officers. In other words, they're prosecutors and defense counsel. And our Attorney General had experience in court doing this as basically his beginning of litigation. And after he left the Army, though, he returned to Washington State, where he worked as a prosecutor, and then went on to become lead counsel for Governor Jay Inslee. And that's more of an me as Attorney General, that is really a prime part of the job, since he commands, and I say that in a military term, he commands the largest law firm in Washington State. So that's a big deal. In 2021, President Joe Biden nominated Nick to become the U.S. Attorney for Western Washington, where he worked to fight drug cartels and sex trafficking. Virginia, you would love to hear that. And he addressed the fentanyl crisis and reducing violent crime. He also chaired the Attorney General's Advisory Subcommittee on Civil Rights, all in preparation for his becoming Attorney General here in Washington State. He resigned from the U.S. Attorney's Office to seek the position of Attorney General in Washington State in 2023. His key focus areas include protecting public safety, which we will hear about, advancing environmental and worker protections, and standing up for civil rights and our Constitution, which I've added because that's most important these days, as we know, and you'll hear more about that, I'm sure, when you ask him various questions about what's happening and how he's involved in what's going on in Washington, D.C. So without further ado, you don't want to hear me anymore. I'm going to introduce to you Nick Brown.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you. I may have to take this bell with me when I leave here. First, I should note, John, that when I was in high school and I was applying for my ROTC scholarships, I actually was awarded both the Army and the Navy scholarship. And, you know, some might think it's a difficult decision to choose between the two. I, on the other hand, did not think it was a difficult choice. First and foremost, I was the son of an Army full bird colonel who may have had a say one way or the other about which branch I chose to pay for my undergrad education. But I appreciate the welcome, and I see some familiar faces, and I really thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about me and the job and the work that's been happening in my less than 5 months as the Attorney General. And what I thought I would do is speak for 10 minutes or so, and then really do welcome your questions. And as I've been going around to get to know the people that I command, is that the word you use, command? Um, I've tried to be very transparent and open with them and answer any questions that they have. And they have run the gamut from the very serious and substantive all the way down to tell me more about Survivor. Which is also part of my bio that the Seattle Times reemphasized again last week that you may have seen. But let me just give you some observations from my vantage point as the Attorney General for the great state of Washington, the state that I have called home almost my entire life, and am really proud to be a Washingtonian. As John said, the office is the largest law firm in Washington. It's actually the second largest law firm on the entire West Coast, second only to the Attorney General's office of California. What that means is, in practice, is I have 830 lawyers that work for me on behalf of you, and another 900 or so professional staff, both administrative staff and legal assistants and paralegals, but also a very robust policy team, legislative team, all of whom are doing incredibly hard work on behalf of the public. And I highlight them first and foremost because you all get really exposed to the high profile litigation, the affirmative cases, and obviously with good reason. That is the thing that is the most newsworthy today, and I'm happy to talk about it. But it represents only a fraction of the work that's happening on a day-to-day basis. And at this time, we're in public service and public employment, and public employees are particularly the victims of what I view as irrational and unfair attacks from all sorts of people, including the President of the United States. I want to lift up the work that they are doing. All of them could do different kinds of work, and they are underpaid and undervalued, and do so without as much fanfare and respect as they deserve. And we have the obligation in sort of two broad buckets. We represent all of state government, every state agency that you might interface with, from the Department of Licensing, the Department of Transportation. All of those agencies have lawyers that work directly for me, serving their client agencies, but also all the very small boards and commissions that are less high profile. They also are fully staffed by the Attorney General's office. And Washington is somewhat unique in that regard. In many, many states, a state agency can have standalone in-house counsel that work for them and do not work for the Attorney General. Washington is one of the very few number of states where every lawyer by law that works for state government has to work for me. Now, they serve their client agencies that report ultimately to the governor in most instances, but it is a unique circumstance. And that is the work that is hard and messy. And, that ranges from advising the Department of Transportation on big construction projects, including building the tunnel in Seattle over many, many years, to defending the Department of Corrections on complex matters of employment and inmate safety, to representing the Liquor and Cannabis Board as we navigate drug legalization over the last 10, 15 years. And so the myriad and scope of legal work is really fascinating. And what I have found most rewarding thus far is that every day I get to come to work and do things that matter. Every day. There's not a moment where I come to work and say, why am I being asked to weigh in or decide or lead or command on a particular issue? because everything matters. When it filters up to me, it's usually the hard and messy things or the big, difficult policy decisions. And that is true both in the affirmative litigation that we bring on behalf of you all and the work that we do for our client agencies. And I cannot imagine being in any other position right now in this moment. I very much loved being the U.S. Attorney for Western District of Washington. It was my dream for many years to be in that position because I grew up as a professional in the Department of Justice, an agency that I had a lot of respect and admiration for. And I never, contemplated resigning to run for public office for the first time, or at least since 8th grade student body president. But I did so because the work really, really matters. And the breadth and scope of work is really fascinating. And because in addition to representing all of state government, my principal obligation is to be the lawyer for the people of the state of Washington. Not every state has a separately elected attorney general. Some are appointed by the governor, which is the case in New Jersey, for example, and Hawaii. Some are appointed by the legislature, which is the case in Maine and Tennessee. But most are like Washington, that we are separately elected as an independent constitutional officer, because my job, in addition to representing government, is to represent the people and advocate on your behalf. And we have been doing that as an agency for many, many years. And my predecessor, AG, now Governor Ferguson, really expanded the scope of that work, particularly on the administration litigation, which I'll talk about, but really created new divisions and units within the office to address matters that directly impact you, regardless of who is in the White House. Created a civil rights division that did not exist before A.G. Ferguson's time to advocate on all hosts of discrimination issues here in Washington. That touches to my core, because I will tell you, as much as I love my state and view us as a state that is doing many, many things correctly, we still generally are in the top 10, if not top 5, of hate crimes per capita in America. And we have more to do when it comes to hate and discrimination in our state. And I love doing that work. We also do environmental protection enforcement to go after people that are harming our environment. We do healthcare work, the myriad of civil rights litigation and affirmative litigation on behalf of all of you. And ultimately, in those cases, I am the client. So I get to decide. My team brings me issues about how we're going to use the power of the state of Washington, because I do not take that responsibility lightly. When I authorize my signature on an affirmative case, I am doing so on behalf of all of you, whether you know it or not. And I also recognize that, even though I was elected, and I think for the majority of people support our affirmative work, there are, 40 to 45% of the population who don't want me to approve some of that litigation. I am reminded of that every time I make the mistake of looking at my Twitter account, which is filled with public input. But I take that responsibility really seriously, because I'm not just acting independently. I'm not doing these cases in my own interest and my own benefit. I'm doing that because, in my judgment and the judgment of all the people on our team, it is in the best interest of the state of Washington. So let me talk about the things that have been most in the headlines. And I get asked quite often whether or not we are in a constitutional crisis in America. And I think that's a very important but fairly academic question. In my mind, we are most certainly in a crisis. And I do not say that lightly. As I think you've heard from my resume, my background, I come from a family of public servants. I've spent most of my career serving the public, from uniform to positions in government. And I do not say it lightly that we are in a crisis situation in America. But so much of my first 5 months has been around protecting Americans from their president. And to me, that is a scary moment to be in. And every time that we bring a case on behalf of the state of Washington against the president or his administration, I do a very sort of simple analysis of, is this an unconstitutional or illegal action by the president? Does it impact or harm Washingtonians? And if Washington is going to participate, are we a necessary party to bring that litigation? And in about 5 months, that has led to 20 cases against the federal government. Now, for context, there are about 30 cases that Democratic AGs have filed in the country. And so I have made the decision not to join or lead about 10 cases. On the other end of the spectrum, at this point in 2017, the state of Washington, which was by far the most aggressive state in challenging the Trump administration, at this point in 2017, we had filed 2 cases, and I filed 20. So needless to say, we have been busy with a host of different issues. And Washington is leading in about, or co-leading in about 7 or 8 of those cases. Fresh for me and mine is because we were just at the Ninth Circuit this morning. We led the first case challenging the birthright citizenship order, which is also at the Supreme Court, but also at the Ninth Circuit. But I was really proud of the team's arguments today, this morning, to reaffirm what has been the law of the land for the last 150 years, that if you were born in America, with very narrow exceptions, that you are an American citizen, and that the president cannot do that via a memo, which is essentially what an executive order is. And, but we have run the gamut of focusing on issues where the president is doing things impacting people's civil rights, to funding issues where time and time again, there have been illegal, unconstitutional cuts to state funding. And, you know, there are a lot of ways that people could have these disagreements and discussions that would not necessitate or lead to litigation. People can disagree about the size of government, about the types of programs that we fund, about whether or not we should invest in funding for, you know, cancer research, or whether or not we should provide for healthcare for transgender people, or whether or not citizenship should be defined in another way. And these, as a democracy, are robust conversations that we should be having in Washington and all across the country, in and amongst people who disagree. Those are important discussions. What we cannot abide by, and I certainly will not abide by, is doing those things illegally. And those are the basis of every single case that we have brought, where our team and many other teams have analyzed an executive order by the president as being unconstitutional or illegal, or a violation of some other lawful precedent. And that is what has generated 20 cases against the federal government. It is not something I aspire to do, nor necessarily take great pleasure in doing, but it is fundamentally important, I think, to protecting Washington. And it is interesting to me every time that I file a lawsuit, again, when I make the mistake of looking at my public input on Twitter, you know, the question often arises, like, you know, why aren't you focused on Washington issues or Washingtonians? And why are you so focused on suing impacts Washingtonians? You know, we challenged the cuts to the National Institute of Health, not because it was a DC issue, but because University of Washington, Washington State and University were due to lose hundreds of millions of dollars in funding for all sorts of public health research and the jobs and employment positions associated with that, a direct impact on Washington. We joined a smaller lawsuit challenging the president's cuts to libraries and museums because of the direct impact here in Washington. I joined the lawsuit, or we led the lawsuit challenging the cuts to transgender healthcare, one, because it was illegal, and two, because Washington has been a leader in that space. And again, I think these are all things that people can debate and disagree about the policy behind them, and I'm always welcome to have that. But we have 3 separate branches of government in this country. And Congress has largely given up any sort of reasonable opposition to the president. Maybe Elon's remarks yesterday will give them a little spine, we'll see. But until then, Democratic AGs are the national safeguards for the rule of law. At least that's my perspective. And I'm really so proud of the work that's been happening in Washington, and my colleagues have been leading across this country, and we will continue to do that. And I look forward to the moment where we have to file less lawsuits, because there are plenty of things that are happening regardless of that deserve our time and attention. But I'm having so much damn fun in this position. Uh, I really am. And I thank every day the public for putting me in this position. And I will do my best as long as I'm in office to continue to serve all of you. So I'm Karen's got her hand up. Happy to answer questions. I'm gonna know Karen. I'll start you, and then I'll go on back. Go ahead.
I heard that you and Governor Ferguson read 2025 the second it came out and started planning way before you were elected to take care of us and protect us and be in the forefront. Could you tell us a little bit about that whole process? And I'm wondering why there aren't Democrats in some room somewhere trying to write 2029, but I haven't heard anything about that.
Well, my first oath is to be honest and transparent with you. I did not read Project 2025, when it first came out. And I would guess that Bob didn't either. Thankfully, however, we have a really robust and talented team. So yes, when all throughout the campaign and when Project 2025 was released, many people on our staff started reviewing that, analyzing that, and collaborating with our other state colleagues to divide and conquer the review and analysis. So most of the reason that we were able to file a birthright citizenship challenge the day after the order came out is because work had been done to prepare, and it was living in the office before I took office. So credit to the team that preceded me for putting that into play. And it is one of the differences between now and the first Trump administration. Washington now quite famously led the challenge to Trump's unconstitutional ban on Muslims and traveling into America. Does anybody recall how many other states joined that lawsuit? Zero. Now, some came on subsequently, but at the time, it was a very bold and new step. And now, when we challenge actions, we're working much more in collaboration. So on every single case that we have brought against the administration, there's been at least one, if not 22 other states who have joined. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Tracy Brown, one of the newest Rotarians, so it's good to see all of you.
No relation.
Yeah, no relation. Unless your family came from Harris County in Texas.
No.
There you go. Having been in the civil rights world for many years, and I applaud the fact that they opened up the Civil Rights Division because I've worked in this area, state and federal investigator. My concern is either the potential closure of HUD's region office here, and what resources and assistance are you going to provide for people in the state of Washington to have access to fair housing? We know that the Washington State Human Rights Commission is overloaded with complaints and not enough investigators, and fair housing is such a crucial issue. Just in terms of those resources, people don't know where to go.
Sure.
And they're very concerning about that. So, and just applaud the passing of the covenant bill.
Well, let me say a few things. One, my first professional job was actually as an intern in the State Human Rights Commission when I was summering in college. I say professional job because my first real job was at Taco Bell. No derision to the professional of my colleagues there. So my roots were, as a young man, were in that work. It was the first experience I had working with lawyers. Second, on a more serious note, as I said earlier, I grew up professionally in the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice was solely created to enforce the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment and protect newly freed, formerly enslaved Americans. That was the statutory purpose of its creation. And to see what is now happening to the Department of Justice, it makes me angry. I got to be honest. It really does. And they have really flipped the mission of the department as a whole, in particular Civil Rights Division, on its head. And what we are seeing from Pam Bondi to the civil rights chief fills me with a lot of frustration. And I don't want to overlook this point. A month or 6 weeks ago, the Attorney General of the United States, which is the most powerful and important law enforcement position in America, if not the world, this was almost an exact quote. She said that she was going to find and root out people from the Department of Justice who did not support the president. Find and root out people because of their political beliefs. It made the news for a day or two. And when I say we're in a crisis point as a country is in part because of what I am seeing we are experiencing from the Department of Justice. Well before the president was reelected, housing in particular was a focus of for me, because it was one of the issues that as a candidate, no matter where I went in Washington, big cities, small cities, Eastern, Western Washington, housing would come up. As much as we in our politics are divided, I think at the end, most of us generally want the same things: safe communities, healthy communities, good schools, housing that's affordable and accessible. And sometimes we lose sight of that because of this moment, because of our politics. We have a lot of disagreement about how to solve problems, but I think we generally identify the same sort of problems that we want to solve. But housing is really important. We have been doing some work around housing. We have good state protections. It is my job to make sure those laws are enforced, but I would like to be more affirmatively engaged in the housing work. In particular, we sued a bunch of realtors and RealPage a couple months ago because of the illegal algorithm they use to price fix and drive housing prices up. There is more work in particular that we need to do around civil rights, so we will be engaged. Oh, here and then here.
Yep. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being open and taking so many questions. I have two really quick questions. One is personal. You don't have to answer. Two is more of a process question. So the first one, how did the 8th grade election turn out? Did you win it?
I won. Yeah.
Okay, good. The second one is more process. So 20 different lawsuits that you've been involved in 5 months. Can you talk us through the decision-making to either lead, join, or pass?
Sure.
Because that has to be something that's moving very quickly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. First, on your first question, I chuckle at this moment. So I went to Steilacoom schools. It's the oldest school district in the state of Washington, the first town in Washington. When I ran in 8th grade, I had a slogan that I thought was very creative, but tended to be somewhat divisive. It said, "Vote for Brown or get out of town." But it's stuck in my memory because some of my fellow students thought it was mean and complained, and like our politics was more innocent back then. But I did win. Process-wise, so I have standing calls at least twice a week, or Zoom meetings with my fellow AG counterparts. Our staffs have almost daily standing calls. And so they are working on a day-to-day basis to review and identify issues that have been issued or that we're expecting based on public comments. And a lot of the work that was done in the year preceding to identify likely areas that we expect executive action to come. And so, sometimes some states have led on a particular issue, and it was important just substantively to continue that leadership and be a lead on a particular case. Sometimes it is a matter of which states are uniquely impacted or harmed by an executive order. An easy example is, all of the illegal federal firings obviously impacted us, but Maryland and District of DC more than anywhere else. And it was important for them to lead. Some of it is purely practical on, where can we bring the strongest case in terms of our bench having experience with it, which circuit we're in. The 9th Circuit has an now outdated reputation as being particularly liberal. It's frankly not nearly as it used to be. We have filed a lot of lawsuits in the District of Rhode Island, in part because of what we view as a very strong bench or precedent there. Sometimes it's a matter of who just has the capacity. There are really, in my mind, 5 states that have the size, the people power, and the expertise to truly lead a matter, a national matter. Washington's one of them. We are larger than most every AG's office, not all of them, but larger than many. And I remember at one of my first conferences last year, I was talking to my colleague from New Mexico, and he has about 100 lawyers. He simply cannot lead in the same way that Washington can lead. And also, we're really good. I mean, we are. And so we have these debates and, you know, conversations, and usually there's a lot of agreement, not always. You know, most of the lawsuits that I've joined, there's universal agreement, but not everyone. And then sometimes, you know, the tariffs case is a good example. We did not join the tariffs case. And there was a lot of sort of legal analysis and questions that I had. I ultimately decided not to join the case because there's going to be a total of 7 cases. And it's one of those cases that if any state won, we all win. And so I didn't really need to spend the people power investing in it. I had some legal questions about it too, and really thankful for the work of Oregon and others to lead that litigation. But Washington did not need to join to get the benefit. And so I reserved my firepower for other cases.
Next question over here, Faith.
Thank you very much for applying your strength of character and your office. Fantastic defense of the Constitution. Really appreciate that. Public health as well. 2 quick questions. I support your lawsuits against the executive right now. Is there any sense of how much his actions are costing in terms of how much the lawsuits cost in total? And the second question is, 90 million Americans didn't vote in the last presidential election. Is there any thought of changing the election process to make it a weighted balance like they do in Alaska or in Ireland? Thank you.
On your second part, I'm sure there is. That feels a little bit above my pay grade. You know, I do think that some of the state-based experiments around different voting systems, ranked choice, that's why protecting state sovereignty and state rights is so important. And you know, one of my good friends who's far more sort of libertarian than I am, he sort of was teasing me the other day because I've become much more of a states' rights person in the last 5 months. But it is, you know, I think it is really important for states to experiment and explore, or municipalities, different ways to do voting. And that is, you know, more important than ever. And I should have answered your first question first, and now I'm forgetting the focus of your first question. Oh, the cost. Yeah. Well, you know, another common critique is like, why are you wasting state money on, no, I know, not you, on these lawsuits? And, you know, we do spend money, although the AG's office is the only revenue generating agency in the state of Washington because of our affirmative litigation. We bring in money for people. But in terms of just the affirmative cases, it's we spend people power and their salaries, but even just one of the cases are on thousands or millions of dollars in man and people hours on that, but we saved cuts of hundreds of millions of dollars. And I don't know what the total is just for Washington. We did a town hall on Monday with the Oregon and California attorney generals up here. And Oregon had analyzed the harm to Oregon at 1.2 billion total. I would guess our number is higher because of the prominence of University of Washington in particular. But we're going to do that math.
Last question over here, Faith.
Yes, my question is about these cuts that have happened in terms of funding. Are they under stay, or is the money actually not going to the people that need it in order to continue to do what, for example, they're doing at the universities?
Yeah, in the vast majority of cases, the process is going the way it should go, Justice Ireland. The president does something or the administration does something that we have found illegal. We file a case, lawyers go to court, judges issue orders, and the government complies. That has happened in the vast majority of cases that we have filed as a state. There have been a few cases in particular, particularly around the grant funding cases, where we believe the government has not fully complied with the order. And then we have gone back to court to compel or a motion to enforce or to advance discovery. And then we've gotten compliance subsequently. On the grant funding cases, you know, there are hundreds of grants that arguably fall under the umbrella of some of the executive orders. And so sometimes it's hard to discern whether non-compliance is a result of willful non-compliance or sloppiness or just new things that they didn't anticipate. But in the vast majority of the cases, they've gone exactly the way that we would expect the courts and parties to operate, which is why I sort of hesitate to say we are in a crisis, a constitutional crisis. But notably, we are not a party to any of the immigration-related cases where the administration, either willfully or pretty damn close, has violated court orders. And that to me certainly puts us much more on the precipice of an actual crisis. But since we're not a party, I can't really attest to that. Let me just say one thing in closing. And, you know, the question I've often asked is, what role is there for you all, the public, in this moment? And I would say just two things quickly in response. One, things like Rotary and this are really important, because these are the places where we start discussing and debating amongst friends and colleagues these really challenging issues of the direction of this country. And so I applaud and encourage the continued engagement in these conversations. And two, as much focus as we have on the national government and actions by the president, and with good reason, please do not lose sight of the importance of state government and city governments and county governments. You know, the legislature passed 300, 400 bills this last session. I would bet, because I was similar, I would bet that most people in this room could not name all three of their representatives, state reps and senators. You guys are a more informed and engaged audience than many, but I certainly could not. Before I worked for the governor of the state of Washington, I was very DC focused and Obama focused. And then I got down to Olympia and I was like, the things that I most care about are at the state capitol. You know, the quality of our kids' education, healthcare, environmental policy, public safety, taxes, transportation, 90% of that is in Olympia. And for the most part, we pay very little attention to that. And so if you're thinking about how do you stay engaged and participate in democracy and affect change, man, you can have an impact by showing up at your state rep's office or emailing collectively or going to Olympia. And that is the seat of democracy today, no matter what's happening in Washington, D.C. So I really encourage you not to neglect the importance of state and local government, because that is where the rubber hits the road on the things that are most important in our lives. But for me, this is a great job. So thank you for giving me the opportunity.
You know how seldom we have standing ovations? Very good. Yeah. What?
Go ahead.
No,
A lot of people talk about America being in a mess these days. And is it because we have too much freedom? Or do we have a little too much government? What's the answer to that one?
I don't think it's either, frankly.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Fred. All right. I want to thank you, Nick. I had a whole bunch of questions that I had actually went on Chat GPT, and they had good questions. I couldn't believe it, but I didn't ask that. One thing I do want to bring up, the last point you made, you're talking about state government. Let's talk about city government and county too. That's where we really make a difference. That's where we have made a terrible error in our country with our bright elite people, supposedly, forgetting about that and only dealing with what comes out on the feds. But the feds come up from below, and we need to really realize, at least this year, most of all is our local elections. And so we will all be involved, and we'll hear about that in our Rotary year, right, Jan? As we go. And right now, I want to thank you again, Nick. We have 600 healthy meals that we are donating on behalf of our Seattle Rotary Service Foundation in your name. So thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate you. We appreciate your being here and keeping us safe here in Washington State. Safety not just from the standpoint of police or security, but safety as far as our Constitution and our way of life. That is really critical. Thank you. Well, now we're not done yet. Sit down, please. No, one of the things now I'm going to turn the meeting over to Jaime to give us some announcements. I want to thank REB Enterprises, Carl Benke, and Bloodworks Northwest for their meeting sponsorship. And now the floor is yours.
Thank you, President John. I'll be really quick. So June 12th, Rotary and Boys and Girls Club anniversary party. It's on 19th Avenue. We're turning 70 years old. It'll be from 5 to 7, RSVP for the club website. The following week on June 18th, we have a lunch meeting at Motif. It'll be the last one for President John Bridge here. Rabbi Dan Bridge will be the honored guest, and this will be Finding Meaning of the Year. So it'll be great. We have a great show out there. The following week, we'll have our President's Party at the Swedish Club. 100 free parking spaces. Oh, yeah. The party will go from 5 to 8. It'll be on June 25th. Let's go out in style, have a good time. And then we'll have 2 weeks hiatus. On July 9th, will be our lunch meeting with Urs Coing at the Washington Athletic Club right here. And it'll be our first meeting of the year. Let's pack this place out where they have to put more tables and like, oh my God, too many people here. So that'll be a plus on the max. Thank you so much and finish it out.
Also, another plug for June 16th, we have our Rotary celebration out at the airport. Not at the airport, it's one of the hotels out there. Anyway, so if you're interested in that, see Kathy. She'll be sure and sign you up and make sure that you're there. Then we have at least almost 3 tables of people coming. This has really been a great meeting today. I'm really thrilled that we're all here. We hope that in the year to come, though, and this is sort of a warning to everybody, we have guaranteed a minimum of 80 meals every week that we're here at the WAC. So that means for people that are online and people that are here, we expect and want you to be here in person, eating some wonderful meals. You know, this is actually one of the better meals that we have ever had, and we have choices, right? So please come. That's to the people online and everybody here. Please come and fill this room up every week that we have our meetings. That's the first and third Wednesday of the month. And to finish I'm not done yet. To finish our Rotary Day, I like to talk about occurrences that happened on June 4th somewhere. I'm going back to 1792. Captain George Vancouver claimed Puget Sound for the Kingdom of Great Britain. In 1912, Massachusetts became the first state in the United States to set a minimum wage. In 1919, women's rights, the U.S. Congress approved the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, which guarantees, of course, suffrage to women and it was sent to the U.S. states for ratification. Of course, Washington had already provided suffrage for women a number of years before. Anyway, birthdays. 1907, Rosalind Russell. 1928, Dr. Ruth Westheimer. And today is the International Day of Innocent Children Victims of Aggression. Virginia. All right, we are adjourned.